Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Invisible Museum Tour. My name is Jeff Olson. I am the Art Education Director for Royal Talons of North America, the proud sponsor of today's program. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information about future programs and upcoming giveaways and events. Today, I have a special announcement. Royal Talents will be sponsoring a contest based on today's episode and awarding a box set of Van Gogh oils to the winner. Details for the contest will be shared at the end of today's program, so make sure you stay tuned. So now today, a little bit about the host. She was born in Russia. She held her first solo exhibition at the age of 14. That's true. Absolutely incredible. Moving to the U.S., she became the youngest student admitted to the Otis Art Institute in L.A. and went on to receive her master's in fine arts at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. Her work is featured in prominent private and public collections. She is the recipient of numerous awards. Along with being a celebrated artist, she's also a wonderfully informed art historian and educator. She worked for over a decade at the Getty Museum. She is also the co-founder of the nonprofit Project Ah, on a mission dedicated to exploring connections between Western esotericism and the arts. She's also the founder of the Z Academy, where she mentors students of all ages. And finally, we are proud to have her as one of Royal Talents' ambassadors for Rembrandt oil paints. Please welcome Zhenya Gershman. Zhenya!
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being and co-hosting the program with me. This is the Invisible Museum Tours, episode 2. So I'm actually going to start the PowerPoint very quick so we can get going on our journey. Right, can you see it?
There we go.
All right, we're going to launch it. Start from the beginning. That should work. So I just wanted to say, for those of you who are joining us today for the first time, thank you so much if you're coming back. We hope that you're going to join us every month. This is going to be an ongoing program. I'm so grateful to the Royal Talents North America for sponsoring and for being so enthusiastic about it. But for those of you who's joining for the first time, it is meant to be interactive. There is no particular script, though we prepare all month for you. We adapt the program based on your comments and questions during the show. So please be ready to type your observations and questions. I'll be relying on you in guiding where this will lead us. It is the Invisible Museum Tours because literally the museums right now are invisible to us. Most museums in the world are closed, shut down. And this is a way for us to travel and join and go behind those closed doors. And the museums are truly excited that we can do that. It is also invisible because we are on Monday. Most museums are typically closed on Mondays. And so that's a great day for us to break through and look at the art. It is also invisible because many things as you travel and you go on your journey and to look at the art remain unseen, unnoticed. And what we want to do is bring it to light, make it so real that a moment ago you didn't see it and now all of a sudden it's the only thing you see. It's so important to you. And it's also so very personal. Some of the things are invisible to us and we see it through your eyes. And today our subject is Vincent. I almost don't need to introduce his last name, but you could have finished my sentence. Vincent Van Gogh, an artist who is beloved across the world. And what's so amazing about him is that he's, unlike almost any other artist, only painted for about 10 years of his life. And in those 10 years, he created over 2,000 works of art. It's easy to create 2,000 of bad works of art, but these are all masterpieces. They're so amazing. And out of that, there's about 800 oil paintings, masterpieces again. And most of the amazing works of art that he did, some of the best and the most, is in the last 2 years of his life. So he's a real enigma of this production. Where did this raw talent come from? He was mostly self-educated. And so what I wanted to do today is not take you on the journey of every single thing that he made, which is nearly impossible, which you can do with pleasure, of course, if you travel to the Van Gogh Museum. And we will be going to Van Gogh Museum for some instances today. Most of his art is collected there, although it is throughout the world as well. But we will be focusing on one of his most famous paintings, one of the most famous paintings in the world. And I'm going to let you think about it for a moment. What could that be? And imagine it. And keep on going to the next slide. So if you remember, and I hope those of you who didn't watch episode 1, you can go back to Royal Talents North America. All of the videos are there right after we finish the program. They live on the Facebook page, so I hope you can rewatch. Our first episode was dedicated to Rembrandt, and I wanted to literally start from the same slide, but for a different reason. So here we actually start from Van Gogh's remark when he went to his museum tour in Rijksmuseum in 1885 and observed in awe an incredible painting. This is a detail of Rembrandt, which is known as the Jewish Bride, and these are the words of Van Gogh. Would you believe it? And I honestly mean what I say. I should be happy to give 10 years of my life if I could go on sitting here in front of this picture, the Jewish Bride, for a fortnight with only a crust of dry bread for food. Would you believe this? Van Gogh is asking us through time. And yes, I do believe it. Last time we explored what is it that Vincent saw in Rembrandt. This time we're going to reverse the question and see what of Rembrandt do we see in Vincent. So I want you to keep this in mind because Rembrandt is really at the formation of inspiration for Vincent van Gogh. So what is it of Rembrandt that we will discover? So here's one of the self-portraits, and it is contrasted here with the Rembrandt self-portrait. And Jeff, I think you would agree with me that both of these portraits, both of these self-portraits, two artists, how do they see themselves? I would say they don't see themselves as creators. They see themselves as warriors. The way that they hold the palette and the brushes is as if it's a shield and a spear, right? Or shield and a sword. They're ready for the battle, right? Would you agree with me, Jeff? Does that
Absolutely.
sound like a good analogy?
Absolutely.
So what I see here is that they're ready to confront the world. What the artists do through the eye, they have to wrestle with the world. But who are they going to battle with? It is not the viewer. It is not the artwork. It is themselves. They have to confront themselves, how they see the world, how they interpret it, and how they raise the bar with every painting that they paint. So the artist as the warrior. And this is a wonderful quote. There's going to be a lot of quotes today because we have to let Van Gogh speak to us. So much of what we know about him is from his own words. He wrote them down. He was an incredible writer, as we will discover mostly through his correspondence, through his letters, of which I will tell you in a little bit. But what I want you to get a sense of by the end of today's experience is as if Van Gogh came into your space. I know we're on Zoom. I cannot see you. You can see me. I don't know who you are, but I want to feel that I know you, but moreover, I want Vincent to sit next to you during this program, and I want you to get to know him. So here he says something wonderful. I should like to paint portraits which appear after a century to people, that's now, 2020, people living than as apparitions. By which I mean that I do not endeavor to achieve this through photographic resemblance, but by means of our impassioned emotions. So he wants this portrait to be living. He is gone, but the portrait is here. He wants it to be relevant, breathing in your space. And that's why I say that I truly want you to feel Van Gogh at your side today. So this is the painting that is going to be mostly the subject of today's discussion. It's going to be the portal for our experience. I'm not going to tell you anything about Van Gogh's biography, though you may know already a lot because there's many films and books out and documentaries and videos on YouTube about Van Gogh. And of course, traveling throughout the world and seeing the exhibitions, you have a lot of background. You're knowledgeable. But I'm going to pretend that we're starting from the blank slate, and we're actually going to do a lot of looking. This painting, known as the Irises, hangs proudly at the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, where I had the privilege of working full-time for almost over a decade. Today, I still bring my friends, my VIP tours, my students when the museum is open to experience the collection. And of course, today I'm bringing all of you to the Getty, to the irises. Now, when I worked there, almost every day when I would greet the people, the most common question was, are you ready for this, Jeff?
Definitely.
The most common question was, where is Mona Lisa? And the second question was, where are the irises? So most tourists assume that the Getty, being so wealthy and prominent, should have the two most famous paintings in the world. Well, I would proudly answer that, yes, Mona Lisa may be not here, but I will take you to the irises. So this is such a famous painting, but when you come to it, what do you see? Like with Mona Lisa, you see lots of photographers. You see a crowd. It's loud and busy in front of it. People are trying to take selfies to just say, I've seen it. I've stood in this company. And like with every celebrity, when we see a famous person, whether it's a politician or actor, I'm in Los Angeles, so here we often see famous people on the street. You kind of become blinded by their fame, and you don't really see them for a human being that they are. So what I wanted to do is to see this painting not as Mona Lisa, not as something so famous, but for the real person, the real being that it is, the real entity, right? I'm talking about this painting almost as an individual. I'm going to take you a little bit closer. And by the way, I hope that in the end you'll help us retitle it. It is titled The Irises, not because Van Gogh necessarily titled it this way. He quickly painted it and sent off to his brother. But it is just collected. It's the way that art historians refer to it. So if you come up with a better title, I think we should have also a mini contest for that. So I take you a little bit closer, and here I start by posing a question. I'm going to take you a moment to process this and to type your answers to us. And it can be as basic as just a shopping list. What is it that you see here? And the only word you cannot say, the name of the game, you cannot say irises. So what is it that you see in this painting? I'd like to hear from our audience. And while the answers are coming in, Jeff, can you start us with a couple of things that you see here?
Well, you know, one of the things that has always struck me by this painting is the infinite variety. And that sounds strange because so many of the flowers are the same color, but it's almost as if every single flower is an individual. They're all painted with a specific character in mind. So I love the variety, and the variety of brush marks. You have that really wonderfully worked foreground, but then each one of the leaves is very flat and specific. I also love the color scheme that's going on here. There's a wonderful directional axis going on that's leading through the eye there.
Yes. These are all
the marigolds,
great
I think, are also beautiful in the back, but I don't want to tip too much.
Yeah, don't tip them away too much. But I bet you that our public is going to see more things that neither you or I actually have noticed.
Absolutely.
This was my experience.
We've got a couple comments now.
Okay,
We've got
great.
motion, unique perspective.
Okay, these are amazing things. So you started off, Jeff, by saying, I just want to reiterate the very important comment you said, that there is an individuality to the crowd. So we have a crowd of flowers, almost like a sea, overwhelming, but within it, there's a lot of individuality. And then the next comment that we have coming in from our audience, that we have a motion. Now, motion is one of the most difficult things to paint in art because oil paint dries, and afterwards it's a still image. This is not a film. But I agree with whoever said that comment, and if you were thinking this as well, there is so much motion. Jeff, could you help me? What is your feeling of, how would you describe the motion here?
Directional motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow the violet flowers, they lead you to that single white flower. They kind of bring you back. I mean, if you enter the painting at that white flower, you end up coming back. And there's a great comment from Angel here, too. She says the solitary white flower being confronted by a crowd of blue violet flowers. So they lead you back to that white flower.
Angel, thank you so much for saying this, and for everyone who was thinking along these lines, there are many ways that he's achieving the motion. So I actually want to look a little bit more careful, to slow down even more, and to say how. And Jeff was asking, which way, which directional motion, and he nailed it. He said through color, right, and through the way the flowers, the sea of those irises, the forbidden word, are pointing us towards the white flower that Angel discovered. But there are other ways, and I want to make sure that we got them. So if anybody in our audience has another clue how we're moving towards that white flower, we saw the direction, the composition of the purple flowers. Is there another way?
The folks are typing.
We're okay. I'm okay at waiting. There's no rush. I really want it to be a discovery for us, and I don't want to be telling you things. I want you to really have this painting do its magic. And I'm truly honest when I say that I'm going to learn from you. I'm ready to be surprised. I want you to see something new that we haven't noticed.
So we've got comments including the direction from the warm earth up the leaves to the white flower. The two triangles in the upper left and bottom left of the campus kind of narrow us down in there as well. So it's not just the direction of the violet irises, but the direction of the rest of the painting's composition as well, those warm on the top and the bottom.
Absolutely amazing observations. The painting is very geometrically designed into two upper and lower triangles. You could see them. The orange flowers that Jeff pointed out in the background, and the earth, they're the two triangles that are helping the irises to come together. One thing that I want to add to this, I want you to specifically look at the middle register. And we focused on the flowers, we focused in the upper and below. The earth is very important. We're going to come back to that comment. But I want you to look at the leaves themselves. Even if the flowers were gone, what I think I would like to add to this, and maybe some of you were typing this as I'm thinking about it, there is a kind of notion of the wind. There's a kind of motion in the leaves, or perhaps not even the wind, perhaps the turning towards the sun. You know how the plants start to lean towards the light, right? And we have a sense that the light is coming from that orange gold sea of flowers, right? And there's a kind of a lean in all of these leaves. The outlines in the leaves are pointing us almost like triangles. Is there anything else, Jeff, that we should add? Any comments, or should we keep going?
Renee comments on what he calls the sweet spot of the composition where the purple and yellow flowers meet together.
Yes, absolutely. The color here is extremely strategic, and we will come back to that as well. So we've agreed, I think we've all agreed, that our destiny here, our destination is towards that one white flower. So the next question for our audience, and believe me, I'll tell you more than you wanted to know about Van Gogh, but just to get us started, because I really wanted to be coming from the painting, why did Van Gogh take us here? Why did we come to this flower? What was the point of taking so much energy of color, composition, stylistic choices to take us to this white flower? So take a moment, if you could please answer it to us. And while everybody's answering, Jeff, what do you see this flower? Is this an iris? Is this a different family? What are your thoughts about this flower?
Well, I'm not an expert on flowers. It looks like an iris to me, but it also has a very figurative quality. I mean, it's a portrait of some kind.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to dominate our viewers, but I definitely could relate to this painting as a portrait. And I'd like to take it a little bit further, but I wonder if we have any comments yet.
We've got, is it a type of self-portrait?
It's very
I'm
interesting.
thinking that may be Angel there.
it's extremely interesting because Vincent made so many self-portraits, and especially towards the end of his life. I think in 1 year, he made something like 20 or 30 self-portraits. Incredible amount. And when I was teaching this painting once in real museum with real public, and I had middle school group of children, and one of the girls said, she raised her hand shyly, and she said, "Couldn't that be Vincent?" And I said, "Sure, what made you say that?" And she said, "Well, it's missing one of its petals, so that's like one of his ears." So I thought it was just it was through a child's point of view, but
Yeah.
it was really interesting that's what she saw. And if we continue looking at this painting, if we go back for just a moment, we could see that definitely this is the only flower that truly stands out. And not only stands out because of its whiteness, but stands up to the direction of everything else. It's the only thing that resists that urge to move from the right side to the left side towards the sun. It's the only thing that's actually looking back at us. Do you see that?
Yes, great
Really
observation.
incredible. So, I mean, if we think about Vincent and we think about how he felt with the sea of artists, there's some of the greatest artists are living during his period. He's in a period of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, and he loves the art by Gauguin and Cézanne. He writes and writes about contemporaries and how they're even better than him. But he also wants to be different, and we know that he truly was a different vision. So in such a way, I think this is a testament perhaps to a psychological self-portrait. Any other comments that do we have?
There are some folks who are still commenting back on the original composition, the transition to the orange, to go into the light. It was Tiffany mentioned, which I think kind of echoes what you were talking about, the direction of this particular flower to the others.
Okay, so I'm just going to reveal one of his quotes. "The heart of man is very much like the sea. It has its storms, it has its tides, and in its depths, it has its pearls too." This was actually from one of his sermons that I'm going to be telling you about a little bit later, an address to a group of people, to a congregation. And in a way, if we go back and think about this painting for a moment, this is almost like the sea with both a storm and a tide. And when we go inside this little flower, it's almost like a pearl, a gentle pearl, some kind of revelation is given to us. So both the oppositions of life, the difficulty, the beauty of a person, and a person throughout the sea and the storm of life.
We had a great comment that actually came before you brought this slide up. It just got through. It said, "To me, it's a seascape, really."
Wow.
Isn't that
Wow,
amazing?
amazing how we're connecting here by Zoom with you. I feel goosebumps like you read inside my studio. So now I want to show something that nobody said. Now, that's not because you weren't good. It's because probably if you stood in front of it, inside the real gallery, and the painting is large, right? It's an easel-sized painting. You probably would have noticed this detail. So don't feel bad, but I do want to bring it up. One thing that nobody noticed is Vincent's signature. And Vincent's signature here is very important and very interesting for multiple of reasons. First of all, the reason he signed Vincent is because of Rembrandt. Rembrandt is the artist who defined himself by his first name. He was very interested in creating an identity that you didn't need to know his last name to know who he was. And in response to Rembrandt, as if he's conversing through time, he says, "Hi, Vincent." It's almost like a telegram between the two of them, right? Communicating. The other thing that's so not like Rembrandt, but different, it's one of the only, if not the only signature that I know of, and I'm sure somebody can prove me wrong, but it's very rare, that it's written on a diagonal. So if we go back to the composition, I'm going to try to use my cursor so you can see it. It's at the very bottom of the painting, and it points us straight upward towards the white flower. It is almost as if Van Gogh is showing us, taking us by the hand and he's even underlying his name and saying, go towards that white flower. So if you were in doubt, there he was right next to you. Now, speaking of Rembrandt, and somebody mentioned the ground. The ground of this painting is one of the most important parts. In fact, if I asked you, if you were a painter and you had to paint, and I'm sure a lot of painters are watching this, but even if you're not, and if you had to paint the ground, close your eyes for a moment. Don't look at the painting. I'm closing mine. And tell me the colors that you will have to use to paint the earth. Jeff, take me. What colors to paint the earth?
To paint the earth, I need some oxide. I need some green. I need some umber. Yeah, red oxide, umber, some green, maybe some yellow, some ochres.
Okay,
White,
now you can
white.
open your eyes. You did fantastic. You painted a beautiful earthscape. But now look at the colors that you didn't mention. Van Gogh sees in earth almost every color that you could possibly imagine. Turquoise blue, bright cadmium red or vermilion, things that we didn't expect to see that. Jeff gave us a very realistic rendering. Van Gogh gives us almost the emotional rendering of the earth. But I guarantee you, after looking at Van Gogh up close, when you go to your garden or outside if you can and look at the soil, all of a sudden you start realizing that this is more realistic, that there is more color to the earth. Where did he get this idea? Is from our friend Rembrandt. And last month, we actually focused for the most part on what we see here as a close-up. This is a portrait also from the Getty. My dream was always to convince the Getty to hang this painting side by side. This is a portrait of Saint Bartholomew. And we focus here, for the point of our program today, on the forehead. And if you look, last time I actually said, stay tuned, and next time you'll discover what is the relationship, what is it that Van Gogh saw in Rembrandt in this forehead. If you look at the colors closer and closer, and the texture with which that it is painted and directionality of the marks, that earth, you could see that Van Gogh was almost foreseeing a style of painting that he is to develop, right? Not necessarily that he's looking at this portrait, but looking at Rembrandt. This could have been almost any Rembrandt close-up painting, late Rembrandt painting. But I hope that you could see the relationship that is so clear, the wrinkles of this man and the wrinkles of the earth, right? The plowing of the ground of the forehead with the thought, and the stomping and walking through and the growth of the flowers through the soil. A beautiful, I hope that you see the poetry and the connection that Van Gogh certainly saw when he looked at Rembrandt.
It's a great comparison, Zhenya. I mean, I think it reveals something about Rembrandt that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and that's how painterly his later work was, but then also how Van Gogh's work was more studied than people think.
Yes, and it allows us to go back to that gallery. I think I can remember. It's like North 205, I think it's North 205, if I'm not mistaken. Not that it's important, but I've lived in that gallery, Rembrandt Gallery, for so long. And when you look at Rembrandt after looking at Van Gogh, because you can change your experience, right? Which way do you go in time? You'll actually notice instead of the umbers and the ochres and the red lakes, you're going to start seeing the turquoise and the yellow, the brilliant lemon, and all these colors you don't expect in the skin. And that Rembrandt is not as brown and uniform as we thought, right? So, or golden, right? So very interesting how they talk to each other, Vincent and Rembrandt. The other father of Vincent, he called Millet, a French artist, Jean-François Millet, much later than Rembrandt, from 19th century, but in France. He called him the father of us all. This is the father, the foundation of painters. And what I would say he particularly, and this is also coincidentally a painting at the Getty, not bad of a collection, hanging right outside of the Impressionist gallery. What I think Van Gogh, what we could safely say that he saw in Millet more than anything is compassion. Compassion for whom? Not necessarily for a saint or a religious character or a wealthy portrait, but a compassion for the everyday man, for the working men and women. And this was very new and fresh and really spoke to Van Gogh's heart. Here you see the man with the hoe, and he's bowing down. There's not even enough room for him to stretch outside of this painting, and he's connected to the earth by the weight of his labor, almost like an umbilical cord through his instrument. His hands and his face are the same color as the earth. So I wanted to show you.
So nice. It's not just an allegory. There's so much genre painting that's more allegorical and uses the common experience in that way, where his work here we see authenticity and empathy.
Absolutely. And then as you get closer, it is painted in an empathetic painterly style. It's really almost abstract. And that's where I want to take you. I want to compare the way that Van Gogh's earth is painted and Millet's earth is painted. So Millet is coming from a realistic tradition, but he's starting to break away with it. And you can see chunkier, heavier application of paint, that things are abstract and quickly molded with palette knife and brushes. Not what we would expect by other artists in his era and around him. So that's one of the reasons that Van Gogh calls him the father, because he sees them foretelling Impressionism, foretelling the expression of the painterly ability. And though the colors are still more brown in palettes, you could see that the application of paint and the thinking of the earth as a subject matter is already here. So now, there's a wonderful quote by Vincent. I plow my canvases as they do their fields. So he's relating to the labor, the hard labor in the field, and that he's literally plowing through the layers of paint. He's not just painting. It's not a bourgeois activity of a artist who's just relaxing in their studio and drinking the wine. This is a hard labor, and that you put your whole heart and soul into it. Your life depends on it. Your livelihood depends on you. Your everything depends on it. And here we actually see one of his popular subjects. He was really attracted at the man in nature, the sower. He saw it as kind of a hopeful image of resurrection, of the earth coming back, of the tomorrow. We'll see the opposite image to that if we look at Van Gogh, the Ripper. That was the answer to his sower, and that is the forecalling of death. So he always thought about very deeply and philosophically. But what I wanted to attract your attention, the reason I use this drawing is because I wanted to point out, remember we spoke about the directionality of the marks. Here it's very clear in this image how he's using the individual strokes in this ink wash to direct our eye throughout the composition. And he's using a new perspective, a new invention in perspective. This is not a linear perspective. Notice no road is taking us back in space. Things are almost equal in size. That sun is so huge, it almost should be in front of the sower, not behind him. But how does he certainly takes us back in space. How does he achieve it? And we might say that he learned it from the Japanese art, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. But he alters the size of his strokes. So whatever is closest to us has more painterly larger strokes. And as you go far in the distance, look at the sky. In the very top of the sky, we have little tiny dots. So things recede in space in the quality of the mark making. And I wanted to bring up the irises here so you could see that there's a very similar thinking, that the brushstrokes in the earth are the largest and the brushstrokes in the flowers in the distance are the tiniest. So it's a very interesting new way, modern perspective that he certainly brought to the art of painting. I also have one more quote just to illustrate this feeling. We only pass through the earth. We only pass through life. We are strangers and pilgrims on the earth, of the earth. So when we look at that
drawing, yeah, I love this drawing, Zhenya. And do you think that there was an influence too from woodcuts or printmaking, especially with Rembrandt's early etchings, on this way of descending into space by mark making? It's such a graphic quality.
100%, and we're actually going to look at a lithograph by Van Gogh today. So printmaking was on his mind, and like Rembrandt, he collapses the boundary between the mediums. So some of his paintings look like etchings, or his drawings look like printmaking instead of drawing, or painting like this. It's black and white, but it's full of color. I mean, I see his yellows and greens and blues here. So he's definitely a rascal in turning all these traditions upside down, but in direct communication with Rembrandt again. And definitely, as we spoke, which with a beautiful transition, thank you for that, Jeff, intuited the printmaking was very important, especially the Japanese prints. And Van Gogh collected them. He had over 100 prints in his collection, and he even attempted some copies. This is a squaring off of the copy of from the illustrated journal. And on the right, you could see how he transferred the image and created a painting in full color. So he was extremely attracted to Japanese art. And my question to myself, and maybe a question to you, why do we think that he would love collecting them? There's always an accepted idea that Japanese prints were in fashion, that all French artists of the time were collecting and looking at them. But Van Gogh is so different. I don't think he would collect just because somebody else is collecting. What is it to him that speaks to him from the Japanese point of view? And for me, I think this is also to contradict myself, but contradiction is the best place, is to break away from the Western European tradition, to look outside of Millet and Rembrandt and see the world through another pair of eyes, where perspective is different and color is different and tradition is different. So he both wants to see the world through the great artists that he knows that come before him in Western European tradition, but he also wants, I think, look at nature, look at portraiture in a completely new way. And when he brings the two together, we get Van Gogh. Now, interestingly, this is a copy, but I want you to look at the original on the left and the colors on the right. For instance, the decorations in this woman's hair, they're blue. Where did he come up with that? The background behind her is acidic mustard yellow. In her back, you will see things that are not in the print. So he can't help himself, or even in the background behind her. It does look Japanese, but kind of like a filtered through Monet's lily garden, right? It's just so interesting the way that he integrates and comes up with his own interpretation. And now, unless there's any comments or questions.
Nope. People are enjoying it thoroughly.
Okay. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the most important couple that I've ever known, Vincent Van Gogh and Theo Van Gogh. So Theo was Vincent's brother, only a few years apart. They were, what is it, 4 or 5 years apart. And without Vincent, without Theo, actually, there is no Vincent. And I'm going to show you how these two were the most important brothers, the most important artistic couple that ever the world has known. Not only Theo supported Van Gogh, Vincent Van Gogh financially. Yes, that would be easy. If you're a good family, you send the money to your big brother who's struggling. Any good family would do that, right? But you also sent him paints and canvas. Well, you could say that's also caring. What's the big deal? That's a nice person. But it was also Theo that told Vincent that he should be a painter. Vincent Van Gogh found himself through Theo. He had talent, but it was Theo who told him, you should be a painter. And it was in Theo's arms that Vincent will die. And we will learn a little bit more about their amazing relationship. And it's also Theo that told Vincent, stop painting in those boring dark colors and introduce color. This is what the future of painting, bright colors. And Vincent resisted at first and even said, perhaps you don't appreciate my art. You could read the letters. There are many letters that are going back and forth between them. But eventually he listens to Theo and his art really blossoms. So I hope I convince you throughout the next few minutes how Theo is inseparable from Vincent. Not to take any credit.
Some folks are commenting they didn't know that.
Not to take any credit away from Vincent, but to show you what the duo, what a love of soul, of kindred spirit, how they were put on earth together. And that's, I want you to remember that for a moment. And look at their faces too, very interesting. There's very few photographs of Vincent, and a lot of them are disputed. People don't realize if it's Theo or Vincent. So we assume this is Vincent on the left, but there is some dispute about. We can't tell for sure. All right, this is very interesting. This is actually from one thing that Vincent said, pictures swallow up canvas and paint. He painted at least a painting a day. I mean, can you imagine? At least sometimes 2-3 paintings a day. And that is during the most difficult time of his life. Even when he would be sick, he painted and painted and painted. Very few times he took breaks. And this is from a letter to Theo. He says, he makes a list all the time, 3 emerald green, 2 cobalt, 1 ultramarine, large tubes, because look at the ultramarine blue in the irises. Mm-hmm. Large tubes, please. 1 orange lead. Look at those little flowers in the background. 6 zinc white, and 5 meters of canvas. Now, this is probably after 2 weeks of receiving the same letter. And what I love is that description comes from the same time the irises are painted. This is about 1889, and we see here the same colors that he's obsessing with. So this is just a very interesting for if there's any painting geeks out there like Jeff and I think that's a really cool letter, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of fun, and I love your comment too about how prolific he was. I read that the irises for him was just a study that he sent off to Theo, and acknowledging your comment about his importance, it was Theo who decided to submit it into an exhibition for him, and what a relationship indeed.
Yes, and we want to break apart some myths about Van Gogh's tragic life, that he never sold a painting, never showed a painting, never been appreciated. That is simply not true. He had a very difficult life for many different reasons, but he was much appreciated, as we will discover towards the end of his life. And one of the examples, this painting was exhibited at the Salon des Indépendants, which is the independent artists, the Impressionists. And it was said by the critics that it stood out from the wall, and perhaps the most important painting in that exhibition. And that's during Van Gogh's life.
Monet had a great comment about this painting. I can't remember it. Do you remember his comment?
I can't recall, but it was really noticed and discussed by this time.
He was really struck by it, and I think it had to do with he thought this painting had so much joy, and somebody who could paint flowers like this, he was puzzled at how Vincent could be unhappy. Because this painting showed so much joy, and I think that goes to a long way to dispelling the myth that we have about Vincent. I think the fact that people said he was unhappy even his lifetime was not as true as we think.
And because Van Gogh is Van Gogh, he's a philosopher. He's a deep philosopher, and we're about to discover this in a moment, where this comes from. He will challenge how we think about joy or sadness, and that's going to be one of the topics that we're actually going to deeply dive in together. So start thinking about the ideas of, do artists have to be sad to paint? What does sadness mean to an artist? What does joy mean to an artist? Because he's going to collapse some of our ideas and I would say stereotypes of how we think about it. So very important comment. Now, here we go. Jeff already told us that this was submitted, and Theo himself said about this painting that it strikes the eye from afar. It is a beautiful study full of air and life. Wonderful. He said some of the same words that our audience came up with, that it has life and air in it. Okay, so we keep going. What is this drab image? So this is a house where Rembrandt stayed for a couple of years, and there's a reason why he went there. We're going to discover that in just a moment. This is the house where he actually decided to become an artist. Why did he become an artist? We already know Theo suggested, but how did it come to it? It's going to be a little story which I'd like to share with you. But this is a museum that you could travel in Belgium and stand in the very rooms. You can actually walk into Rembrandt. I almost think of him as Rembrandt. In Vincent's room where he stayed for a couple of years and feel the moment where the inspiration came to him. This is where he began some of his early paintings and drawings. So how did it all begin? Again, with this man. This is Van Gogh's father, Reverend Theodoris Van Gogh. Looks like a pretty intimidating fellow, right? So in Van Gogh's family, there were two professions that you could assume. One was an art dealer, and the other was a minister. Those were the two careers that were traditionally taken by the family. And both Vincent and Theo started as art dealers. Theo continued that into Paris as he moved and trying to help Vincent with his paintings. But Vincent also started as an art dealer. And believe it or not, he was quite successful. In his early 20s, he was traveling around Europe and selling art. And in one of his letters, he says that he feels good about himself, that he's making more money in his 20s than his own father. But pretty quickly, the story changes. Pretty much everything Van Gogh undertook, he failed at. And the reason was always the same, because he was too passionate about what he was doing. So he began getting really annoyed with the clients and the customers in this big firm where he's making a lot of money, that they're basically treating the works of art as commercial entity, as commodity, that they're not collecting and the work is not sold for the value of art, but as an investment, as a commodity. And we know that the clients started complaining. So you can imagine, what does that mean? Vincent says, "You're an idiot. Why are you buying this? Look at that thing for 2 francs. That's better than what you're spending all this money on." You could just hear his voice, and pretty soon he gets fired. Now, after he gets fired, he actually decides to pursue, he was experiencing kind of inspiration from religion and thinks, okay, if it didn't work out there, maybe I can pursue my passion for the art, for the humanity, for he really felt great about human beings and his relationship with the world and philosophy. Maybe I can go in the footsteps of my father. And he did study religion and tried to obtain the permission to become a minister and travel to Borinage, which was a coal mining city with a lot of misery that you could see on the streets. And this is a drawing that he does at this time in 1881. So he's not a developed artist yet, but his compassion for the people, you could hear it from his letter, from his words, and from his drawing. And I think it's worthwhile that I read it. The workers there are usually people emaciated and pale owing to fever, who look exhausted and haggard, weather-beaten and prematurely old. The women generally sallow and withered. All around the mine are poor miners dwelling with a couple of dead trees, completely black from the smoke and thorn hedges, dung heaps and rubbish dumps, mountains of unusable coal. Now pause here for just a moment for you to look at this image and smell the description of everything that he's talking about in his letter to Theo. And these are the people that he wants to preach to, and he prepares a sermon. And some of the quotes that I already shared with you about the sea and the pearl of the human being, these were the words for these people. Now, he starts to do everything like he does with great zeal. So he takes off his shoes and walks barefoot. He walks everywhere, starts to give away all of his money that he has, starts to eat only bread and water to show his compassion for the poor people, and looks quite weathered, unwashed, and a bit like a homeless. And for the church, he was seen almost as an embarrassment that he's taking his role to such an extreme. So he gets fired again. So after he fails both of these ventures, that is when Theo says, by the way, I think it's time you become a painter. And he takes this religious zeal, he takes this passion that he had for the art in the art dealership, trying not to sell the art, but trying to make it collected, appreciated, and combines it into his art. He's mostly self-taught, although he took some classes in various academies here and there. But I want to start with a quote, which I think is very interesting without any images. Although, I'm just going to move because I have a picture of Jeff and I there. Okay. Although I'm well aware of the worth and originality and superiority of Delacroix or Millet, and we can actually add here the word Rembrandt. For example, I could still say, yes, I too am something. I too can achieve something. But I must take this artist as my starting point and then produce the little I'm capable of in the same way. Jeff, does that hit the spot for you?
Very much, very much.
So what
I
he's
love
saying
that appreciation of artists of the past and creating a dialogue. He needs to have a dialogue with them.
Right, and so he goes to museums and he collects prints. He starts to buy through Theo. Theo sends it to him. He collects the black and white reproduction of the famous painters. But I also love that he says, I do have something. I'm some. Just give me like a little bit, right? I'm not asking for much. There's just such humility here too. So I want to show you where he begins and how he teaches himself. Who are his teachers? Well, Rembrandt. Just for a moment because So this is a Rembrandt painting which I adore. It is here in my city where I live in Los Angeles at Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA. And have you seen this painting, Jeff?
Yes, yes.
Now, I know last time I took you to the Getty. Next time we'll go to other museums. Norton Simon too. We must go together. So this is a painting, Raising of Lazarus. So it's a religious subject matter, but you can separate yourself from the Bible and think not just Jesus and Lazarus and the miracle, but the idea of the human power of belief, that if you believe, even the dead can raise. And it's a very poetic, beautiful, philosophical image. And I want to compare it to how how Vincent has painted and interpreted it. So you could see the same characters. He's actually doing a copy. What happened here? So I want to open it up to our viewers. What do you see is different here that Vincent brought that was not in Rembrandt? And while you're typing, I'm just going to tell you an amazing quote by Vincent. He said that artists should, and this is I'm paraphrasing, that artists should copy like musicians perform Beethoven's notes. You don't copy the notes on your instrument, you interpret them. You bring something of yourself. So we the artist, should copy this way. We should interpret, not just to copy it. So I wonder if we have any comments. What is different? What does Vincent see here that was not in Rembrandt, or he saw that we don't see in Rembrandt?
Folks are still typing. There were a couple previous questions. Somebody wanted to know where they could get a hold of these letters between Vincent and Theo.
Oh, there's many, many publications, and you should not stop if you can't go to the library or order a book, because you can actually download them for free as well online. I have a couple. I prepared a couple. I was sure somebody would ask. This is the book that I love, The Letters of Vincent Van Gogh. And it is edited by Ronald Liu with beautiful annotations, gorgeous translation. I absolutely love, love, love this book. And if you want something fancy, I also have, I bought at the museum. I think you can get it on Amazon and online or even on eBay. This is a beautiful book of letters, but it actually reproduces Vincent's letters, so you could see the facsimile. You could see the photograph of what they look like. Let's see, I opened the first page, and here you see with his drawings. And they are put side by side with beautiful paintings. So if he's discussing his art, then the letters put next to the artwork that he's discussing. So this is Vincent Van Gogh, a self-portrait in art and letters, and edited by Anna Sue. So highly recommend this book as well.
Comments are coming in now. So the first comment is, the sun, all light, they are outside, only two characters. The person being risen, I think this is a great one, is looking down and not up. So that was a great observation. I love that he's included the sun and the hills and possibly haystacks from his local scenery in the background. The bright sun again. Nobody's jumped on the one that I saw right away, which was the absence of Christ and being replaced with the sun. So
the sun is Christ.
Is Christ, yeah.
Brilliant, Jeff. That's so brilliant. Amazing, right? So he's interpreting the Bible. He's interpreting the religious message. He's interpreting how we might think of God. He's interpreting Rembrandt. He's taking out religion out of this painting in a way, right? Or
Right.
He's saying religion is in nature. So amazing, amazing observation. Thank you, everybody. And get ready for our game, because in a moment I ask you exactly the same questions. How does he see the following painting? This is a Pietà by Delacroix. Eugène Delacroix was one of the artists that also Van Gogh worshipped. He considered one of the best artists of all times. And how does Vincent interpret this work of art? For once, while you're typing your observations and thinking about them, I want to point out that both images are mirror images. If I go for a moment, you see how they're reversed. That is because he's not looking at the original, nor he's looking at color. He's looking at black and white etching reproductions. So he has to bring in the color and guess the color. And actually you could see where he does it right and where he kind of misses what the original would look like without knowing it, right? Mary here has that beautiful blue, but in other places, and some of the yellow glowing on the skin as well is similar. I wonder if there's anything else that we notice here that's strikingly different.
Well, Angel made several comments, and they did pick up on the last painting that Christ was left out. So kudos there, Angel. And what else we've got here? Some folks are typing, it looks like. I love just the difference in the light. And it's interesting that you bring up that he was copying from black and white images. I think that speaks volumes, and also to his understanding of value. He has such a wonderful grasp of value in painting.
Right, so the gradation from light to dark as it translates to the intensity of colors, which is one of the most difficult things to do. I always tell my students, I teach art, and I say, I could teach you values, but I can't teach you color, because color is so individual, right? But the values is where our art of painting is, and he's mastered it. It's incredible. So I wonder if there's one or two comments, and then we'll keep going. I know we have only a few minutes left.
He really brightens up the earthy elements. He gave Christ red hair, so there's a bit of a self-portrait there.
Yes,
also
bravo.
looks similar, looks similar to the self-portrait. The sun rises there.
Yes,
so
I want to
like
just congratulate anybody who noticed that the Christ is one of the only, if not the only, red-haired Christ that we meet. And this is indeed Vincent right in front of you. Very interesting. If we had another hour, we'd just take it apart, right? If we go back for a moment, Lazarus is also Vincent. He is raised from the dead as well here. So very interesting how he inserts him in these works of art. Now, let's just take a look. It's blocked by our image here. On my screen. Just very quickly, an interesting from his letter. My thoughts clear and my fingers so sure, this is what Jeff said, right, that I drew that Delacroix Pietà without taking a single measurement. So if you remember the Japanese print, he squared everything off to transfer, but here he didn't measure anything. He just looked at the print, which is much smaller than his painting, and just transferred it by intuition. Amazing feat here. And talking about the color and black and white, which is so important to us, just click here. So we can't talk about Vincent without talking about his mother. He didn't come from nowhere. Was very human, and he did have a mother. And we know this because this is now the third museum I referred to in Los Angeles, the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, near Los Angeles, one of the most beautiful collections. that houses this painting in their collection. And I wanted to give a shout out to his mother, because perhaps she was not the easiest person. We don't know exactly what kind of relationship. I don't think it was the best relationship in the world, but she's the one who was the painter in the family, unspoken of, because she enjoyed watercolors. And when Vincent was little, she's the one who gave him his first brush. So I have to say, no matter what kind of mother she was, I hope she was a good one, but I want to thank her. I want to acknowledge her name was Anne Van Gogh, or Anna Van Gogh, for what she has done, that she has opened our eyes to Vincent, and he was writing to her quite a bit as well. So this particular image, he wrote about it. I'm doing a portrait of mother for myself. I cannot stand the colorless photograph, and I'm trying to do one in harmony of color as I see her in my memory. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
So he's looking at a black and white 19th century photograph. He can't stand being away from his family and just having that, no color. This is what he was looking at. And he makes that on the right. I mean, none of us probably would have seen these colors. It's so incredible, his vision. I mean, he says, I'm trying to restore it from memory. So in memory, his mom is glowing green, right? This is just how he sees the world. It's unexpected. It's different. It's emotional. It's psychological. The symphony of these greens and yellows are so spectacular. Now I switch very quickly, because I know we have very little time left, and I was so excited and prepared quite a bit for you. Here we see
Don't worry about the time, Zhenya. Don't worry about the time. People are enjoying it, so you're doing great.
All right, because I always think that I don't have enough, and then I just threw all this great stuff. And this is just a sliver. I mean, we could do invisible museum tours only on Van Gogh every week, and we wouldn't run out of information. So this is a particularly mysterious object that's housed in the Van Gogh Museum. They have an amazing collection of archives. And this is his treasured Chinese red lacquer box. And what do we see inside? We see wool threads, right? 16 colorful balls of wool thread. Why would anybody be excited about this? Because it seems that Van Gogh experimented with color theory, not just in painting and in paint, but thinking about what color does by combining these threads. And you could almost imagine that he was running out of the paint so much. He was painting so thickly, writing these letters. I'm out of blue on emerald green again. And while he's waiting for these colors to arrive, he is trying to experiment with various color combinations. He's basically weaving the color. He's thinking about color theory. What happens if we put these two colors together that generally don't go together well? They're not complementary. What if we put red and green, which are so opposite? What happens? And this magical box opens up another dimension in his work. Van Gogh said, it's not my words, I'm painting as weaving of cloth. So if we think back to the irises, which we're going to see in just a moment, once again, I want you to remember this idea of weaving. And not surprisingly, weaving was very important to him as a subject. He created a series of painting. This is an early painting in 84. I say early, he's just been painting for 4 years, and he will end painting in 6 years. Just such a short career, but for Van Gogh's lifetime, this is just the beginning. And he's fascinated with the weaver. And if I haven't convinced you yet, let me show you this weaver. Here it's done in a drawing. It's an ink, pencil, and watercolor wash. And if you look at the lines, they're almost done as if you're weaving into the fabric, like a tapestry. It's a little bit different almost from the Sower. The Sower, a lot of the lines were going diagonally. Here we have a lot of horizontal and vertical lines, like the wefts and the weaves of the tapestry. Exactly what the weaver is doing, right? Very interesting how he thinks about his technique, not just oil painting, but as fabric, as a tapestry. I also wanted to point out, done in a similar weaving technique, a portrait of the Postman. And this is a portrait of Joseph Rouland. And if I had to point out anyone in Van Gogh's life who was important to him, it is the postman. Why? Because it's the only communication he has with the real world, with his brother. This postman is the carrier of the good news. If his painting sold, if his brother liked the new work, if the paints are coming, what is happening in Paris, what is Gauguin doing, right? What are the Impressionists are up to? So you could see on his hat it says Postus, right? He represents the link between him and the outside world. Joseph Rouland became a very good friend of him, and all of his family is painted by Van Gogh. This drawing is quite large, unusually large, and is also housed at the Getty collection. So I wanted to bring it out because it lives in the same building from which the irises now reside at. And just to give you a perspective of this postman's job, there were, in a few years, of course, he didn't deliver all of these letters, but between the decade of letters between Theo and Van Gogh, there are 600 letters written by Vincent. 600 letters. There are only about 40 letters from Theo, and we think it's probably because Van Gogh did not save them. So it's amazing that Theo is saving everything, all those words. We know Vincent through these letters, right? A very important man. And now I want to show you that Vincent did not just do one pair of irises, but he returned to the subject around the same time period a number of times. This is a painting. Hello, Metropolitan Museum of Art. Hope you also enjoy this presentation. This is another version. If I had a long time, I would actually make us write an essay. What are the differences between the one at the Getty and this version? But you could clearly already see that these are irises collected in the vase. The tonality is different. But here, what I wanted to share with you as well is a quote, because by this time, Vincent is gaining recognition. So don't let anybody let you know that he didn't know how famous he's going to be. Maybe he didn't know he's going to be the top-selling painting in the world, but he did have a sense of his fame. A very upcoming and important art critic, Albert Aurier, wrote in the most important magazine, Mercure de France, an article where he singled out Vincent and said that he was the most promising artist of all French painters of the time. And Vincent did not like it. Vincent responded with a long letter saying that he lists, I spared you the quote here, but he lists all the other artists, some of you've never heard of, that are better than him. And I love this word. He says, thank you very much for your article in the Mercure de France. It seems to me that you paint with words. In fact, I encounter my canvases anew in your article, but better than they are in reality, more meaningful. Isn't that funny that he has such humility that he didn't even kind of want to embrace the success? He was shy. He knew his own worth, but he didn't need a painting sold for millions of dollars. He knew who he was. He knew his mission, right? I find that extremely important, and I wanted to point it out to you. Now, a little bit of context before we finish together. I told you I didn't want to tell you much about Van Gogh before you look at the irises, but now I want to share with you something extremely important. Where were they painted? They were painted in a monastery which was held in Saint-Rémy in the St. Paul Asylum. This was the asylum for the mentally ill that Van Gogh decides to check himself into. Why? Because he has attacks of epilepsy, and during these attacks he's not capable of controlling what happens to him. He has no memory. People describe that he eats dirt or paint, so he has no memory of it. Today it would be easily controlled and supported, and he would not be called crazy, but at the time any kind of mental distress is turned into a mental institution. So here he's given 2 rooms. Theo rents 2 rooms, almost like in a hotel. One for him to sleep in and to eat in, and one for him to paint in. He turns one of the monastery cells into a painting studio. In each of those rooms, there are barred windows. He's not allowed to go outside without supervision for a while, and sometimes not even allowed to go outside. And he writes this: through the iron barred window, I can see an enclosed square of wheat, a prospect like Van Gogh, which is a painter, above which in the morning I watch the sun rise in all its glory. Here in this cell, he paints most of the what Monet describes as happy paintings. And in not one of those paintings or drawings, the bars ever appear. He looks outside that window and eliminates bars. He is free. He is not caged. He is not behind bars. All of his paintings show absolute emancipation and freedom. So I wanted to share that with you. And I'm sure
read that he had painted some 130 paintings while in San Remi.
Absolutely astounding. And here we come to this idea of sorrow. This is a lithograph. He started to experiment with printmaking, and this is a lithograph he designed. You'll notice that it says a word in English because he was fluent in many European languages, including English, came from his job, from his art dealership days, and because he traveled to England, he traveled a lot. And he also, in his sermon that he wrote to his brother, I hope you read the full version in one of these books or online, he writes in that sermon, sorrow is better than joy. Now, I put a question mark here. He said sorrow is better than joy, and he goes on to describe what he means. But I want to put a question mark in your mind. What does he mean here? And then he continues in his sermon and says something very beautiful, something that really spoke to me. There is time for sighing and of praying, but there's also a time of answer to prayer. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. But to me, this is very profound, that there is an yin and yang, that sorrow is better than joy. That's why I add a question mark. They're part of the same experience. And perhaps sorrow is necessary he experiences sorrow, but he gives the viewer the joy. It's kind of like almost like a processing, right? Incredible to think about these words. Now, finally, the irises. I hope you have good titles for us, but because I hope that if you ever describe it or share this painting with your friends or family, you'll never call them the irises. As you see, there's so much more here, right? Just like in Mona Lisa, if we ever to explore her together, there's so much more than just saying Mona Lisa. And after this journey and after seeing these things together, I wonder if we can find at least 5 more things that no one mentioned yet that we see here now or we feel here now. And I give you a moment.
There's a quote associated with this painting from Van Gogh that I've always thought was meaningful to its interpretation, and that's a quote where he says, "I wish they would only take me as I am."
It's absolutely beautiful.
Such a poignant reflection.
And I just read another quote in here last night as I was rereading, almost like an answer to himself. He says, they say know thyself, but it's very difficult to know thyself, and it is even more difficult to make a self-portrait.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting answer to his own thought.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to add and take us now, after everything you've seen and heard, what was invisible to us? What was invisible to me still that you haven't shared? I'd love to know and learn from you.
We have another comment from Angel. I think sorrow and joy occur almost concurrently, as if you are holding one in each hand while you walk forward. Beautiful, beautiful.
And there is some holding hands in this painting, right? There's a relationship that we start seeing between all of these flowers and leaves and strokes, right? Anybody else? Something that we see now that we did not mention yet. Feel now that we did not feel before.
No, folks are still typing
Good.
and commenting.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. We only have a couple of slides to wrap it up, but it really is important to me that the painting, not even I reached you or Jeff reached you, but that the painting reached you, that Vincent came into your room and whispered something to your ear that we don't know. We want to know what he said to you.
Since it's taking a while for the comments to come up, I think it's probably okay to continue, and then we'll make sure we'll come back and add more.
Okay, that sounds really good. So the next slide. I told you that Theo and Vincent are inseparable. In fact, when Vincent dies, allegedly from suicide, although there's much mystery about his death, Theo will follow at age 33. Van Gogh dies 37. Theo is 33. Within few months, he will die. The two of them were simply inseparable. And last night, as I was so excited, I couldn't sleep because I couldn't wait to deliver this to you, to your homes, to your hearts. I came up with an idea. It came very clear to me how the names of these two brothers is almost not accidental. Vincent is from a Latin name which means victory, and Theodore means God's gift. So we have Vincent that even through death conquers. He still talks to us. He's still talking to you on Zoom even not even in the original, through his works of art. And Theodore was his guardian angel who lived only to help him, only to support him. Theodore, given by God. Together they were buried. Together they stay forever. And there is another interesting quote that Van Gogh says towards the end of his life. And I could already see myself one day in the future enjoying some small success. What he really means big success, but he's very modest. And missing the solitude and the anguish as I watched the reaper in the field below through the iron bars of my cell. And that is to answer back to our question about sorrow and joy, right? So he feels the success, he knows it, and he already regrets being behind the bars where he could feel so profoundly. A very inseparable in his eyes. Jeff, do we have anything on the irises, or should we keep going?
I think this painting now has something to do with expectations. So that's from Anna. So she's seeing something new in it. Marty says he feels like a wander through the garden, feet on warm earth. So I think there's a sense of warmth coming from it. And I think that may be something that Vincent's certainly commenting on, right?
Absolutely. There's such idea in art as tactility, a painting that actually makes us not just look with our eyes, but start to feel sensation with our body. And most of the time it's referred to the hands, that it's so tactile that we could touch it. But I'm amazed by the comment from our audience that you felt it through your feet, like you were barefoot and walked through it. Yeah. And I would agree, it feels warm to my feet. It feels prickly to my feet. It feels freedom to my feet. I could feel through my feet into my heart. Amazing, amazing metaphor.
Yeah. Lori is commenting all the same and different, and I think that's a great comment. There's a Van Gogh quote that I have in my studio says, "Great things are done by a series of small things brought together." A wonderful quote.
And again, a very poignant observation. And I hope that even though we asked and only a few comments so far came in, that this is a question that's going to stay with you through the day or week or life, and that you'll keep seeing something new. That is the point of art, that you'll keep seeing something new in this work of art, that it'll continue talking to you. And of course, if you feel like sharing your observations, please just post it in the thread later. I will be reading it and answering it, or you could put it on your Facebook page or media and just tag us so we could see it and respond. So I want to wrap up before we announce a contest with Vincent's. Here Vincent is penetrating, it's a close-up of his self-portrait. He's penetrating your screen, coming through the time and place like a time travel machine. And I want to end this experience by saying, what is it in Van Gogh's painting for us? We kind of gave him time and energy and explored him, but what does he give to us? And I'm going to give you my personal favorite quote that is tattooed in my mind every day as an artist, as an individual. You don't have to take it as a painter. You could take the following quote that's coming as someone who wants to pursue something but have an obstacle, and we all can relate to that, whether it's because of isolation or money or time or distance, and having to do this anyway because you believe in it. And this is what Vincent says. I hope you're ready, because this quote almost makes me cry. I hope I don't start crying here. If you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, you cannot do your dream, then by all means, paint, and that voice will be silenced. And with that, we come to the end of our episode 2, and get prepared. Next month, Jeff is going to tell us the date when we're going to release the next live episode of Invisible Museum Tours. I hope you enjoyed it. Keep commenting and sharing, and I want to share the slide for our competition. Jeff, take it away.
So how to win, folks. So you need to reside in the U.S. or Canada. And then we are going to ask you to write a poem inspired by Vincent's irises. So think about everything that you heard today, every thing that you thought and felt, and put that into words, and then tag, like, and follow us at the Invisible Museum Tours, hashtag Invisible Museum Tours, at Z Art Academy, at Royal Talents NA, and then on the next meeting, which I have as the 12th. Is that right? Monday the 12th, Zhenya?
I believe so.
Monday the 12th of October, on our 3rd episode, we will announce the winner based on all the folks who post their poems and tag us at Invisible Museum Tours, Z Art Academy, and Royal Talents NA. And you too will win a Van Gogh set of 10 tubes. May even have more than one winner. We'll just have to see how it comes up.
So I wanted to come back to you. So if there's any last thoughts or questions, we can address it. If there's anything that you'd like to share.
Just a couple things here came in. Anna says, I think it's interesting how many of the paintings we viewed today, how important sunlight and warmth of the earth was to Vincent. And I think that's a really, really important to mention, because that is both physically and metaphorically something really important for him. There's Linda says the hope of life going on in the irises. Deep breath of solitude of the white flower from Alex. Yep.
I love the word. Yeah, it's almost like a poem already. The deep breath of solitude. That's a beautifully said.
Yeah. There's some thank yous, and folks are really enjoying that we're talking not just about art materials, but art and artists and art history and art appreciation. So thank you, C, for that shout out. We really appreciate it and glad you're enjoying the series. And lots of thank yous.
Yeah, we hope that talking about art materials is great, but art it inspires us to create. And if you are not calling yourself a painter, why not try to push the paint around and see if something happens? I really believe that everybody has a creative kernel inside them, and Vincent could not be happier if you did indeed try to paint or at least write a poem, because the words can be, as Vincent says, as a painting. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Anna, and everybody at the Royal Talents North America. I cannot appreciate enough your support and believing in this series.
Oh, you're welcome. As a pleasure as always, Ina. This was fantastic, and I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I do. I certainly am glad to be along for the ride. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you same time, Monday, October 12th. We'll talk
Share this program.
Then.
Share it.
Thank you.